Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, January the 2nd, 2026, and today we are talking about jumping worms and solarization. We evaluate the good and badness of cities, if such a thing exists, and of course, it's Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right, happy Friday, everyone, and happy New Year again. I think I can say that every day, at least until the weekend. It definitely gets a little weird after that. Maybe even cynical when you're saying it in July. So yeah, anyway, I hope your New Year's are off to a good start. We had a nice little break there for a couple days and went up to a friend's house for their New Year's Day party. They have a tradition where people bring their Christmas trees, which they can then burn to the absolute delight of the children. That was fun. It was nice to walk around their farm. They have this amazing hiking trail. So shouts to Ben and Bree up there at Rootbound Farm for hosting us. I also did some incredibly boring but much needed cleaning up of our shed. It's not quite done yet, but it just took a load off of my brain to finally take the time to get that organized a little bit. I really like starting the season off from a fairly literal clean slate. It just makes things easier. I also like that cleaning gives me a good option of something to do when it's cold outside. There's always something to clean up, move around, or organize, such as farming, but there's not always a ton of motivation to get outside when it's cold, so I combine the two. Yeah. Thinking. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about efficient mulching. This was way back in 2025. We also talked about why the lack of collab farms and late cover cropping. On the mulch efficiency stuff, at Wolf Bird Homestead asked, quote, any thoughts on putting down a wood chip road to receive wood chips further into the property, end quote. Well, good question, but for us on our soil, it doesn't, and I don't know that it would really work because we are too wet here, and it would be more like a trap than a road. I sort of tried this in an area where I wanted them to dump the chips further down the hill because they kind of kept dumping them at the top, and then it would just get really cluttered at the top with all the space behind it. But they kept getting stuck when they would go a little bit further down the hill, even though there was like a thick mulch there. Gravel is probably the only option as it won't decompose and it kind of locks together nicely and creates more of a road-like vibe. In a drier climate though, if I had, just unlimited quantities of chips, then I could see it working. In the dry summers here, the no matter what truck they're in, the people can drive right over the grass because the clay essentially becomes concrete. So there's that. That's an option. I guess that clay has its benefits in that way. On the co-op convo at AWTW wrote, quote, I tried 3 different farm co-ops here in Australia over the last decade, and honestly, none of them worked for most and served only few. Disproportionate cost/time efforts versus expected returns, over-harvesting or harvesting things people put no effort into, and occasional theft of supplies and equipment from every single one just took too much to maintain. Then there was just the fact that occasionally you disliked someone in the co-op and it ruined the joy of being there. If you have found it working well, great, so happy, jealous, but happy. Sadly, it's something I will never take part in again and just focus on my own plot and effort, end quote. Thanks. And I think, or at least I hear, that one huge element to collaborative farming is the communication piece. This, probably as much as, the business side, seems to require the most amount of work. Specifically, things like nonviolent communication training and just finding paths to having regular, difficult conversations without hurting or angering one another. Additionally, one thing I heard recently that I feel like is kind of relevant to this conversation, but also just life in general, is that annoyance is the cost of community. The chances of someone getting along with everyone anywhere all the time is zero. It's just zero. You are going to be annoyed, frustrated, put off, and so you have to find a way to manage and mitigate that feeling. Obviously, there's a point at which, that is, their problem and not necessarily yours. But in order to work collaboratively, growers will have to accept that collaboration inherently is sticky and find tools to mitigate that stickiness, to compromise, to communicate, and work towards a specific goal. Find people that also feel that way. There are quite a few good comments on co-ops in general on that thread, worth reading. So shouts to all the contributors, as always. On Tuesday, we discussed producing your own mulches, our current business model, and the lottery. As I assumed, the lottery got a lot of the attention in the comments. I liked this from @MatthewMeals, who wrote, quote, annuity payments on that sum of money makes no sense. A very modest investment of that money can return far more than you would save in taxes. You could generate $32 million a year and never have your original sum go below $800 million. End quote. Thanks. And technically, mathematically, that's correct. But the trick with this is that in order to return 4% on $800 million, which is where that $32 million a figure came from, I assume, you'd largely have to be investing in major corporations, AI, banks, pharmaceutical companies, etc., that effectively degrade our soils and our resources and our society, frankly. So in my version of this, where helping the planet and environment is the objective, investing $800 million in degradation to have $32 million to invest in regenerative farming and ecological rehabilitation would be a hard balance to justify, I think. If you could find a way to earn a more modest, say like 2%, that would be like $16 million a year, indefinitely investing in renewable energy, ecological restoration, etc., then I suppose that's fine. It's just less money to contribute to the world in the same amount of time. Doing $1 billion worth of good would be an amazing privilege. So however you get there, awesome. Take a drink of tea here. Also that day, @WisestFool asked if it was too late to submit intro covers. And I think for now, we will save the intro covers for our anniversary month, which is what, September or October? I can't remember. Whatever month we did it in the last year, we will do it again this year in 2026. That was super fun. I loved those. So you have all year to, write the lyrics, make the music video, the works. I expect some more good ones this year. On Wednesday, we went live for New Year's Eve, which going live is always super fun. We will do another live at some point this month, probably towards the end. You can always go watch and or listen to the recording, but quick apologies to our podcast only listeners who would have not got the New Year's Eve episode upload until 2026 because, well, I screwed up. My last effort in 2025 was just to make a mistake, but it did come up eventually, so that's good. One last random mistake to round out 2025 seems fitting. Yeah, and something to improve on in 2026. We talked about a million things that day, and I especially liked talking about soccer. But anyway, one was about the ease of growing lettuce or making it profitable. @AmyIsFlexible wrote, quote, "Hard disagree on lettuce being easy. In central Mississippi, it gets eaten alive by bugs or turns to brown mush," end quote. Thanks. And yeah, I mean, growing most things in a southern state is just tough. It's really about finding the right timing, and especially in the heat, doing every, little thing correctly. I think of Ray Tyler, though, of Rose Creek Farm, who is there in southern Tennessee, near the border of Mississippi, who made a name for himself growing almost exclusively lettuce. So it definitely can be done. It's just that the hotter, more difficult the climate, the more technical all of this stuff gets. But yeah, easy is relative. Then on Thursday, we did an onion mashup, best of show, and I was really delighted to see how into it people were. Lots of really good comments there. @Christy Pollock wrote, quote, "Oh, nice to have these mashups. Look forward to more. I find the whole short day, long day variety thing fascinating. Here in Europe, we are almost all over 40 degrees north. Even Rome, Madrid, Ankara, with Lisbon just under, brings it home just how different the climates of our respective continents are, and how much I hope the Gulf Stream, etc., that keeps us warmer so far north survives," end quote. Absolutely. It's all so contextual. And I don't know a ton about growing onions in like Australia and the southern hemisphere, but the only land there in Australia above 40 degrees south is Tasmania. So as a continent, it's much closer to the equator, which I assume gives them a slightly larger focus on like short and intermediate day onions, though feel free to correct me on that, growers in those areas. But yeah, it's just so different all over the world. And onions are one of like a favorite crop of mine. And when we play the If I Were a Monoculture Farm game, we always, choose alliums. So expect more onion stuff in the future and more mashups. Glad you all like those. All right, great comments and engagement as always, friends. You all are amazing. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, warm it up, Chris. BRB. So you thought I would get the crisscross reference I would go with would be the jump one for what we're about to talk about, but I took it a different direction that time. Yep. Today's episode is brought to you by Ohio Earth Food. So you got your soil tested or need your soil tested, it's time to contact Ohio Earth Food. Since 1972, they have been growers' trusted source for organic soil amendments to apply before you plant to prevent those deficiency symptoms that limit production. Their knowledgeable staff have all been a part of certified organic operations and can help you choose the best products for your soil and deliver or ship them right to your farm. With locations in Northwest Ohio and just north of Madison, Wisconsin, Ohio Earth Food wants to be your partner for organic inputs. Don't count on luck this year. Start your seeds in the Seed Catapult potting soil and put their Revita fertilizers in your beds, and rest assured that your plants will have all the nutrients, stimulants, and energy for whatever comes their way. Feed your soil and let your soil feed the plants. Visit them at ohioearthfood.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. High Mowing Organic Seeds is celebrating their 30th anniversary with 47 fabulous new varieties for 2026. Highlights include downy mildew-resistant cucumbers, a poppy that looks like cotton candy, and 12 new tomato varieties. High Mowing offers more than 750 varieties of certified organic, non-GMO vegetables, flowers, herbs, and cover crops, all trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingseeds.com to request a catalog and use code 26NOTILL, all one word, 26NOTILL, for 10% off your order of $100 or more. That's highmowingseeds.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Katie Liu, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I am hoping for advice about managing invasive jumping worms. I live in coastal Maine, zone 6A, large backyard growing space with mixed raised bed and in-ground vegetable garden and fruit/berries. In hindsight, I think I have been seeing little piles of invasive worm poop for a few years now, but did not recognize what it was or that it was indicative of a problem. Over the course of this summer, the soil in one of my raised beds, 4x8, has morphed into coffee grounds-like consistency. It's striking. It's all the soil, not layers or portions. The worms themselves are like tiny writhing snakes and not fun to handle. Plants do not root well on it, and some peppers/eggplants fell over. 2 other beds and the ground near the beds have also evidence of the worms. I would love feedback on my plan. I have been handpicking and killing the worms I find. I plan to add no compost or other organic material this fall, hoping to reduce the population by not feeding them. And in the spring, I will solarize the beds. I have never solarized anything and curious how I know I have solarized long enough to kill the worm eggs. How deep into the soil will solarization heat it to the needed temperature? Should I turn and repeat solarize? Is there any way to limit the spread? What can I expect once I start growing in these spots again? Unfortunately, I don't have space/sun to relocate my garden to a new area. Thank you, Katie." End quote. Okay, great stuff here, Katie. Thank you. And bummer about the worms. I don't think you have to relocate. I don't know that it would be helpful. You're probably going to have the same issues all over that property. So we have done a little bit on the invasive jumping worms already, but I will always take an opportunity to reacquaint myself with the most recent research, especially as it is ever evolving. So just to back up a sec, the invasive Asian jumping worm is not your average earthworm. Well, it's actually a few different species. There's not just like one that are here in the US, but in general, unlike the also invasive European earthworms, the Asian jumping worms live just below the soil surface and do not dig very deep into the ground. What that means is that they will rapidly decompose surface litter, leaving a coffee ground-like worm castings on the soil surface, as described here by Katie. The Euro-earthies, by contrast, pull litter deep into the soil and leave their castings nearby where the plants can use them, the rhizosphere. Leaving the rich castings on the surface, like the jumping worms, makes those castings susceptible to erosion and drying out, and this may lead them to lose more carbon than they sequester in certain situations. Like Katie notes, the jumping worms are voracious and active, most of them moving similar to snakes, making them both hard to handle and frankly a little bit ick to deal with. In their native habitat, such as Japan, the native plants have adapted to deal with this, and they are mostly only an issue in nurseries, compost facilities, and interestingly, but not surprisingly, no-till operations. Shallow tillage at the warmer times of year, like 2 to 3 inches down, in fact, may be one option for mitigating their numbers. Here in the US, they have the potential to dramatically alter our forests, especially in warmer regions where they are consuming the leaf litter, leading to drier soils and nutrient losses, as well as changes to the soil chemistry. So some amount of mitigation isn't the worst idea. Solarization has indeed been put forth as an option to control, and studies do seem to bear out that it can be an effective treatment, especially, I would imagine, in a controlled space like a raised bed. In order for solarization to work, you need to use clear plastic placed tight against the soil and sealed all the way around to ensure that the heat stays in as well as possible. The weather has to be warm and sunny. A sunny winter week is not likely to do the trick, nor is a cloudy warm week. Same rule applies to tarping with opaque tarps. You need some warmth and some sun to make them effective. For the solarization, you need 2 days at least with temperatures in the soil at 104 degrees or 40 degrees Celsius, so probably around around one warm, sunny week will likely be adequate, at least to knock them back without harming your local microbiology too terribly much. You do not want to leave the clear plastic on for more than a couple weeks, though, as it will begin to have negative effects on the deeper and deeper soil life that you want to retain. For control, a mustard drench, which you can look up the recipe for online, it's like 1 gallon of water with a third cup of yellow mustard powder. That may help compel them to the soil surface. That way you can pick them out, or have your chickens ready when you slowly pour that mixture onto the surface. I mean, if you could really industrialize that method, it could really be a free or at least cheap protein source and a good control method on the slightly larger scale, and maybe something to that. Steering clear of chemical treatments here, there is some evidence that controlled burns can be quite disruptive to these worms, not suggesting that for your small garden or whatever, but maybe on a larger ecological scale, or just something to consider. And it will kill cocoons and rob juveniles of litter that they would, feed on the next year. But obviously, burns are not without their challenges, as we've discussed. Prevention is also going to be quite important for all of us, which presents some unique challenges for this world because it is horticulture that seems to be moving them around the most through mulches, potting soils, compost, and potted plants. If you are buying in plants, buy in bare root plants. If you are buying bulk compost or potting soil, ask the composter what, if anything, they are doing to mitigate jumping worms. To that point, I'm interested in how these creatures will change the composting and nursery industry, and that could be a topic to explore with Jane or another composter at some point in the future, because that does tend to be a place where they are quite prevalent. As for planting, plant your peppers and eggplant maybe a little bit deeper than you normally would. They tend to not attack stuff that is planted too deeply, but by and large, if you do those little control methods, you should have good production next year, to answer that part of your question. Anyway, I hope that was helpful and covers some of what you were curious about. It's still quite new here, this problem, but as more and more research comes out, we will continue to explore it. Otherwise, for the moment, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, City of Lives. City of Lives? City of Lights? I don't think it works, but we'll be right back anyway. Today's episode is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by FarmRaise. Still struggling with your balance sheet? Your lender's asking for a balance sheet and you're stuck with a spreadsheet mess or guessing your numbers? FarmRaise Tracks takes the stress out of farm finance. With one click, you can generate an accurate, up-to-date balance sheet that shows your assets, liabilities, and equity. No accounting degree required. You'll be ready for loan applications, tax season, or just a clearer picture of where your farm stands. Join thousands of farmers using Tracks to build stronger businesses. Get 20% off with code NOTIL20 at farmraise.com for the lifetime of your membership. All right, back to the show. All right, so right before our Christmas break, I talked a little bit about where to draw the line in ag with technology, but didn't really get to share any of the feedback from that episode. And anyway, somewhat offhandedly, I said something to the effect of people aren't going to just put down their phones and move out of cities and everything else it would require to save the planet from complete depletion. We as a society just aren't going to change that significantly, at least not rapidly enough, and no amount of suggesting we all should will make it happen. And Weiss Fox wrote a good response to that comment, quote, "I think it's very inaccurate to say that people moving out of cities is necessary or even beneficial for protecting the environment or reducing resource usage. If you took the population of New York City and gave them all yard/farm-sized pieces of land, it would be environmentally catastrophic. Most yard/farms are no better ecologically than parking lots, if no worse. And while there are ways to minimize the impact, planting native plants, not having a fescue lawn, not using fossil fuel fertilizers or indiscriminate insecticides, etc., it would destroy huge swaths of wilderness and drastically increase car usage," end quote. Great. Now, I was more referring to leaving the city more out of inspiration than because cities are inherently terrible. But this comment is good and correct in the sense that if 8 million people just poured out of New York City and into the rural area around there, that would be a wild stress on the environment. However, this got me thinking about the role cities can or do play in the environment. To be sure, cities are extremely consumptive and generate a profound amount of waste, use a profound amount of energy, but they are relatively efficient uses of space as well. The compactness also makes them ripe for efficiency improvements in a way that rural areas are not as easy to improve upon efficiency-wise for how spread out everything is. Like the commenter mentioned, driving, for instance. Providing hundreds of people with renewable energy in the countryside, to use another example, can simply be a bigger lift than providing a single building in the city with renewable energy if you put solar panels on the roof and all those sorts of things, at least theoretically speaking. Moreover, the potential for cities to be energy generators or capturers and not just energy users, capturing the energy of footsteps and bikes and cars and gyms and wind and sun and rain and all the things, or waste creators, is pretty high. But the challenge is that policies are slow, funding is low, so cities often don't meet their potential and become waste centers and not contributors. In that way, I don't think people would have to leave cities to join the ecological movement. They would just have to get inspired locally to refashion their city into something quote unquote greener, literally and figuratively, I suppose, because rural life is not going to be for everyone. And as the commenter notes, can't be for everyone, at least not immediately. Certainly there is room for more people to quote unquote go farming, as it were, but there is also a lot of space to improve the infrastructure we currently have in our cities to capture some of the potential of having that many people so close together, to farm the rooftops, find ways to generate and collect energy, all the things. I'm idealistic like that, but I have no general issue with the idea of cities. But that's especially true if and when cities find ways to contribute. Because what I don't love about cities, and what I think all cities need to hear, is that they cannot just absorb and use the food and power generated by rural America and return nothing. They can't expect farmers and rural folks to give up their farmland to data centers and power plants, which I saw some no data center signs here in Kentucky yesterday because, yeah, people's lazy obsession with AI is going to sit itself in our rural laps. So, but anyway, they can't do that and not themselves offer something back in return. You know, the light pollution, for instance, that interrupts the migrations of birds we need on farms. Cities cannot continue the waste creation without composting their food scraps. They must find a way to contribute to the soil, the air, the energy, and their local ecology. Everyone has a duty to the land, no matter where they live. So whether or not cities are bad isn't really the right question. The right question is, what are we all willing to give back so we aren't just drains on the planet that supports us, regardless of where we live? Anyway, I look forward to your thoughts as always on the random things that I talk about. And otherwise, that rounds out our first Friday of 2026. Look at that. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear.
All of my friends are going places, start families of their...
Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of January, you will get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Sarah Favre, or Fave, but it's French. It's like F-A-I, yeah, Favre, like Favre, but better. Colin Entz, Robert Kilgore, Lala's Family Farm, Kyle Richardville, Patrick Weaver, Alex and Oliver, Bill King, Chris Yates, and Ian at Grindstone Farms. Shouts to all of you for keeping the story going this week, because as you will remember, Ridge from our story has unfortunately run into the cult leader they tried to escape when he and Linz moved to Florida from Wales, which I want to emphasize, nothing against Wales. That's just where the cult leader is from. I'm sure Wales is awesome. I can't wait to visit one day. And the cult leader had chased down and caught Ridge by the shirt, lifted him up into the air, and asked him in his strong Welsh accent where his mother is. And suddenly, from just above him, he hears in another thick Welsh accent, "Look up, Buttercup." And Linz jumps out of the tree above them onto the cult leader's back and wrestles him to the ground. The cult leader lets go of Ridge. Ridge is able to escape, and with a strong-handed chokehold, right? Linz is, she's the gardener, so she's got these really strong hands. Linz is eventually able to make him pass out. The other men from the cult come to help, but so does a herd of angry moms, and so the rest of the men run off when they see the pitchforks and hear the cop sirens. The cult leader is hauled off to prison for assault and eventually convicted of the cult stuff, but more importantly, Linz, Ridge, and the rest of the moms get to grow in peace and peaches. Peaches grow really well for them, actually. Anyway, they thrive because, of course, they do. Moms rule, cults drool. That's the moral of the story. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you Monday. Bye.
'Cause it's my funeral.